So we're really honored and grateful to have a few minutes to sit down with Lauren Zelek, CEO and founder of Zelek International, an experiential travel company with a lot of deep connections with Japan. Lauren, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us.
こちらこそありがとうございます。
No, very good. Yes, very good.
And I have to keep it up since we've been locked out of the country for 3 years now. And
Right.
I'm really rusty. I don't really have that many Japanese friends
Well,
stateside.
no, that was good. That was good. So you're doing well with keeping your Nihongo fresh. So I wanted to really just get into it by asking you to talk a little bit about yourself and ZI and how your company came to be. So please.
Sounds great. I have a little bird friend right here who's going to join me maybe for this interview. I'm outside here, so excuse that for in advance. Where do we start? So I moved to Japan when I was 11 years old, and it had a huge, significant impact on me on all angles, spiritually, physically, mentally. I lived there for about 8 years with my parents, and I give credit to my mother. She's the true traveler and curious adventure. We went out and visited as many prefectures and countries outside of Japan as possible, just to scratch that curious traveler nature. And so was splitting my time there and in upstate New York, where I was born and raised before Japan. Really felt like my essence in being became US Japanese. Yeah. At least my identity. So fast forward till now, and the whole journey through my entrepreneurial career and finding the company in Denver in 2017 now has been rooted in the US Japan identity, right? So now, since the country's opening up, we are excited to help bridge the two nations through the art and science of travel. But all the history of this has been a roller coaster, and our stories on our website if anyone wants to check it out more on that. But at the heart of it, it has been rooted in the US Japan connection that I was given as a young girl, and obviously through the network we have built in the travel and hospitality world here and over there.
You've spoken to me a lot about being a third culture kid, and you've given a little bit about your background with that. So just to reiterate, what is a third culture kid, and what's the work you've done in that area?
So from my understanding, third culture kid, from the research and from wonderful Ruth Van Recken, who's written, as people in the community say, the Bible for this demographic of humans. And there's a book called Third Culture Kids Growing Up Among Worlds. And when I discovered that book and I read it, oh gosh, I just had this sense of, oh, I belong. I have a community. I understand myself more. And from reading that and obviously connecting with her and other researchers in the field, I have learned that like the definition of third culture kid really to be someone who was raised outside of their passport country due to their parents' occupation. So it doesn't just specify, an American living in Japan or vice versa. It kind of applies to someone who, left because their father was a missionary or business or in military, or foreign service or an international education, right? And they chose to live abroad and raise their kid there. And it, outside of their passport country in one country or another country. So from my understanding and how they kind of laid it out in the book and research is that, you identify with multiple cultures, you have this global identity, and belonging can be a really hard thing to find because sometimes you don't feel like you really belong anywhere, any one culture understands you. So the research is fascinating, and I see it as just another demographic as humans. It's not anything better or worse. There are challenges that TCKs, third culture kids, face in their development years and into early adulthood, but also a lot of great strengths that they bring to the table. Multiple languages they can speak, leadership qualities, very open mind, very global kind of heart and perspective, right? That I believe positions them to be, next cohort of global leaders. So that's what I have learned, and I've been so privileged to meet so many in the U.S. Japan space, but also from other countries in the last few years, and it's definitely a comforting one.
So our initial conversations revolved a lot around. I mean, when we first started talking a few months ago, we're still really in the thick of the pandemic and travel restrictions, and I know a lot has changed since then. And your company, what really drew me to it was the fact that you put a lot of emphasis on finding like a co-creation of value between the traveler and the destination. I think a lot of traditional travel companies, the ones that are still around, they focus and have focused on simply moving people, right? Just point A to point B and then goodbye. But you take a much more hands-on approach. Can you talk a little bit about that and what ZI does and how you differentiate yourself?
Right. So credit to all the travel agencies and companies that survived COVID, and the approach they took prior to this global pandemic, right? So we saw with the rise of the internet, online travel agencies like booking.com or Airbnb just gaining steam and being a source of information and booking travel. Right now, other travel agencies and travel agents, which I think is a dying term in this industry. Traditionally, they would just be that source of, hey, here's a hotel, we'll book it. Here's a flight, we'll book it, and you go and we'll connect when you're back. So I still think that is a approach to travel in the industry. And with the rise of online travel agencies like booking.com, that's caused problems. As we worked with clients during the pandemic and we spoke to a lot of travelers, that really removed the human element. And so I've sort of seen this as this travel agent that's been around since the 80s and 90s and early 2000s is sort of stepping in and advising more travelers and becoming, sort of a consultant and destination expert. So that's really, observing this entire shift in the world and studying this industry. I have seen the huge opportunity of marrying that human element to the traveler experience and taking it to the next level. And this is really where ZI has gone in the last 4 years by creating a trip that can leave a positive impact on the destination as much as the traveler. So it's, taking it from A to B to Z. You've got a traveler, you're working with a destination expert, you're marrying that with some local guides and destinations, and you're creating this entire trip that can just benefit all the different stakeholders in this entire process, right? Especially the locals. I think with the shutdown for 2 years, at least with Japan, now more than ever, local family businesses and hotels and prefectures that your traditional traveler didn't go to pre-pandemic, they need the support. So that is kind of the overarching, goal we're working for, and trying again to provide value add to the traveler, the destination expert, aka the travel agent or advisor, and the destination and local community.
You've spoken to me quite a bit about like bridging the cultures themselves of East and West through what you do, right? And how that was sort of the impetus for you getting involved in this industry. What do you think, has anything changed with that? I mean, ZI existed before the pandemic, ZI exists now. and during, right? And you had that big thing with the Tokyo Olympics and really going above and beyond and doing over like $3 million in refunds for everyone, which is, I think, really a big deal. How has that bridging changed, or the methodology to bridge the cultures through travel and tourism changed before and after now, or where we are now with the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it really just goes back to bringing the human element back into the travel planning and facilitating and delivering the trip, bringing the human element really back into it. So rather than, for example, we did book a lot of hotels and accommodation and tours and travel services for Olympic families, right? And it was more so the pre-pandemic approach of just booking and working off of commission, right? Is getting a cut of that from a business standpoint and just making it happen. The reversal period, that was bringing in a lot of the human element of negotiating, of representing both sides, right? The travel supplier, the hotel, and the traveler, and marrying to, in terms of understanding that we're going through this global pandemic. We're all responding differently. We're all struggling differently, but that's something that is the same, is that we're all going through something hard and everyone's having their response to it. But at least showcasing each side of the party, how they are responding, right? Culturally and with communication, and just trying to help them get in the other person's shoes. I think that's strengthened for us, bringing that human element in, really prioritizing education and ensuring that, we're here to make it right for everyone. But we just want to open that stream of consciousness in terms of like, this is how they're communicating different, because again, it's so you're across the world, literally, and things are done differently between these two cultures. That's really where, we learned, okay, education is first, and moving forward, we want to strive in any touch point of the traveler journey that we're designing a trip, right? We'd like to give them as much insight into Japanese culture ahead of time and connect with a few locals, whether it's virtually, right, over a Zoom call or a virtual tour before departure. And obviously, once that traveler lands in the destination, do everything ahead of time or while they're there to give them some very hyper local experiences, and getting matched with a local guide, or going to stay at a homestay, or going way far out of the city to spend a lot of time with the people. So that's the goal, to bring back the human element from the destination side and give people those really, really intimate experiences that they're seeking, because from my observation, we're all not wired to be spending time on our computers more than a few hours a day, I think. So
Yeah.
And
agreed.
yeah, and I feel that from talking with locals and a lot of our partners over there and in other countries we aspire to operate in and have a network in moving forward in the future, I ultimately, I just know and I feel from my conversations that, and I'm gauging, and I could be wrong, but locals really enjoy when the traveler knows a little bit about their culture and country, and really takes an effort to show that they care, and that they're kind of going out of the normal touristy role, in a sense, right? And I think we've got an opportunity as Americans, and obviously global citizens, to do better, right? To just become better stewards of the planet that we travel, and respectful of the cultures, and also very engaged. And education is a way to open that stream of consciousness, and again, that empower people to just act in a more responsibly sensitive way.
In terms of Japan, and that's really Japan, and to a certain degree East Asia, is really the depth of my knowledge, and in terms of lots of travel, I suppose. But there really are some stark differences in acceptable behavior between, East and West in some specific areas. And to be frank, the American tourist does not have the best reputation for being culturally sensitive, right? Or culturally knowledgeable about, when they're going to some place. I think from a very, a reductivist view probably. But have you heard of anything where, there are a lot of these places in Japan and worldwide, but just focusing on Japan, that, need the business. They need tourism to come back. They need visitors to come. But at the same time, they want visitors to be somewhat knowledgeable about what acceptable behavior is, about the culture. Have you heard of any of these places, like municipalities, towns, cities, maybe resorts, that could work with businesses like yours, that they would give maybe a discount to people coming in? Hey, do this cultural boot camp, right? Or introduction to our area that's really short, right? Right. Yeah. That, and we'll, hey, but if you do that, and Lauren says that you watched it, and then we'll give you whatever, like this discount off of room rates, or something. Have you heard of any kind of thing like that?
No, but I think you have a great idea, and we should test it. we should propose it to some of the prefectures that we do work with, right? Is how do you encourage and incentivize the American traveler to go there by going through a boot camp or a like an online course? My team's talked about putting some online courses together to promote that destination. It's you've got to give them that incentive and encourage them. Why would they leave, right? The more cities, right, and go there, and what's the incentive? And it's going to benefit the prefectures. So there's been so many articles that came out about what Japan was going through with over-tourism pre-pandemic, and the one that comes to mind is the Kyoto, the bamboo forest, and people would just go there for the selfies and carve in their names in the bamboo trees, and of course, it really offended the locals, and it just got so busy in Kyoto, and they had to come out with these signs, right, that said, please respect the local culture, and put them up. So the problem is there, and we don't want to go back to where we were pre-pandemic with that. So, where in the traveler journey do we come in to educate before, so that doesn't happen? And again, we help Japan get further to its goal that Prime Minister Abe set, in 2016, of we want 60 million annual visitors, but we need to disperse them. We need to get them out to the Inaka, the remote prefectures, because these local economies are struggling. So we have a big challenge in front of us, but I think with education and working properly with the right prefectures and figuring out some sort of win-win for all parties, it's doable. But we'll have to start just chipping away at the ice and see. And I've run into this problem just in business, which prefecture is open to trying something a little bit new and innovative and creative. We'll just have to see what their risk tolerance is with stepping outside of the box and trying a new approach, right?
Well, this is where your expertise and your know-how come in to play, right? That you have these connections and relationships with municipalities, with prefectures, with destinations, and the people there. You can also, disguise, this video is going to be out there now, people can watch it, but disguise in a good way the cultural sensitivity and education in an intro video for this location. So, hey, we're going to show you all some 3 really cool local spots to hit up that are really pretty or something, are really cool, and then put those cultural things in there, and so people don't know that they're swallowing a little bit of medicine. But no, that's really great. That's really great that you and your staff are that hands-on about it.
Ultimately, I just from the traveler standpoint too, and anyone listening and watching, arigato, thank you for joining us in our fun conversation here. we know Japan and after a global pandemic, that international trips, they're bucket list. They're you want to have an unforgettable experience, right? And you're going to spend a lot of time and resources to get over there. At least us, and I hope any outbound company to Asia or Japan, prioritizes really understanding your goals and preferences and designing and co-creating this with you so that you come back really ultimately changed, or inspired, or, just moved by a place like this special country that I love so much. Any country that you choose to go to post the pandemic and you're spending all your resources on, I understand that you want to get it right. And it can be very challenging to marry a lot of preferences in your party or look at all the options online. And that's where I think our approach, at least with partnering with you and collaborating with you and being very interactive in planning this and setting you up right for success, that is what we prioritize and what we love about what we do, right? And I think now more than ever, the travel agent is sort of your travel partner and designer, and they're not going to let you fail or let you astray and get lost in a country or get sick and have to quarantine. They're going to go to bat for you because they're in love with that country and they want you ultimately to have the best experience to come back with.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of getting everything right, especially for a place that you've never been, right, as a traveler, or haven't specifically been. Even if you have been to Japan, maybe it's some other place that you haven't experienced in Japan. Getting that right is really a difficult thing. So having a partner in that is, I think, pretty important. So we're looking at, it's no secret that Japan has been pretty rigorous in terms of their restrictions for travel, coming into the country during the pandemic. We're starting to see some, loosening up there, but just in general terms, what are you expecting over the next few months? We're talking in April, and things can change, but at this point, what are you expecting over the next few months?
A slow, continued rollout of a triage rollout of allowing certain types of travelers in. So it's been just fascinating to see that early March, students and business travelers were allowed to enter the country. Now we're at this really funky phase in the process where it's family members of Japanese and foreign residents of Japan can visit. So I kind of call it the kinship visa. Like if you're a family member, right, of someone who lives there, like you're in the next wave of travelers that can enter. So it's, I think with the final stretch of leisure travelers, being allowed to enter the country, we'll see in the next few months that announced in the news, and the cap of those many types of travelers to be raised, because that's kind of been the trend with these other business travelers, students, and now family members, right? Is that they've got a certain amount of number it can enter every day, and they're starting to raise that number. So I think by the time summer is here, there'll be a good 30 to 50% chance, let's say to June, July, we'll have some news about the rest of us, right, of travelers being able to enter. But certainly by August and fall, and a lot of my other friends and network and experts, Japanophiles that I've spoken with, they agree with the same, that post the election in July, there'll be some firm dates put out there. And so the fall time is obviously a gorgeous time to visit Japan and explore with the fall foliage and the taste and the hot springs and all of that. So it will be swarming, I think, by that date.
Fingers crossed that we're
fingers crossed.
Yeah,
fingers and toes crossed.
We're getting to some kind of a if not on the other side of this thing, to some sense of normalcy or whatever that's going to end up being. So wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me. And I'm really looking forward to getting to these, in-person events and being able to travel and all those things. So the best of luck to you and ZI going into the future. We expect some really great things.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for the opportunity.